Hello again.
Where are we?
You know, a few years ago, a friend of mine began questioning some of her long-held religious beliefs. Can you all hear me? And one day, in a state of frustration about this, she said, I just don't know what to believe anymore. And I couldn't help feeling excited about that either. I couldn't help feeling excited about the possibilities for her in that. What might emerge for her if she no longer knew what to believe. I could hardly contain myself. I think I might have said something like, well, that's great. And what I meant by that is that in such times when our old beliefs are challenged, these can be breakthrough moments, can't they? Right? When something even more powerful and promising comes forth to move us even deeper and more authentically into a living experience of faith and grace. We all hold beliefs without even necessarily knowing what a belief is. And I would say that all a belief is a mental construct. It's a mental construct. It's based on what we've been taught, what we have learned, or what we have experienced. And hopefully, as we mature and grow, our beliefs change and grow with us. I mean, haven't we all had beliefs that we no longer hold, like when we were children and young adults, and as we grow and mature, our beliefs change with us. Beliefs are very useful, for the most part, especially when we think of them as stepping stones rather than set in stone. Right. We want to take care with our beliefs and to choose them carefully. And one of the best advice I ever received was from a college professor many years ago who said, you have to take responsibility for what you believe. Ooh. Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? You have to take responsibility for what you believe and consider the implications of what you believe. That's what that means. To take responsibility for what you believe means that we have to consider the implications of what we believe. For example, if you believe that God leaves some people out of the circle of love, you have to be responsible for that belief. We have to be able to take responsibility for that belief rather than pointing to some kind of religious idea to back me up or to say something like, well, God said it, I believe it. That settles it. Right? And of course people do that all the time. But that's rather like blaming God for something that we wouldn't morally choose. So, what I'm saying is that we have to remain conscious, and always choose a better belief. And ask, what does my belief serve? Who does my belief serve? Is this a belief that creates more peace in the world, more love in the world, more healing in the world? Or does this belief foster a healthy environment for which our children can grow up strong? Future generations? Our experience of life is filtered through what we believe. And one of the beauties of our tradition, New Thought tradition and Unity tradition, is that we're free to continue to grow our beliefs, to tweak them and change them as we see fit. Yes? Yes. So if you're confused about what you believe, or what others really believe, then I invite you to look at your actions, or the actions of others, because that's where belief becomes real. That is when what you truly believe is evoked from within you, comes forth from you, particularly when things get very difficult. When the pedal's down on the metal, you know what I mean, not just some words that we use or profess every Sunday like we do. That's when beliefs go through a process where they're pounded and pressed and cauterized and purified, and we find out what belief really means to us. Now, a story that illustrates this comes from the tradition of the New Testament. Now, friends, I've been in Unity long enough to know that in Unity there are bibliophiles and bibliophobes. And I don't know what side of that you're on, or maybe you're somewhat in the middle, but we can accommodate it all. It's another beauty of our tradition. Because we say, or at least I say, that I don't know if these stories are literally true, if they happened in just this exact same way, but there's a truth in the story. And that's what we're looking for, these stories as spiritual teachings from which we can learn and grow and apply or not. That's what it's all about for us. It's a beautiful thing. So, this is a story that shows us what Joshua, Jesus, believed, not through what he said or preached, but by what he did. So take a deep breath and settle in for some storytelling. So it begins in a little first century town called Capernaum. It's a pleasant little town, about 1,500 people at the north end of the Galilee Sea. Joshua spent a lot of time there. He had friends there. People were very familiar with his teachings. And on this particular day, by the time the morning light had broken and the animals were gathering and the people were gathering, Jesus appears. And for whatever reason, he wants to get out of town for the day. So he very deliberately walks through the village and out of it, headed for another village called Naim. First, 2 or 3 other people join in, follow along. And then as he keeps moving along that old dusty path that was worn by generations of plodding donkeys and goats and sheep wandering through the countryside, he's joined by others. Soon a whole procession of people are following. They pass farmers' fields and the farmers stop and they get out and say, well, what's going on here? Let's go see what this is all about. They drop their tools and they join in. And by the time mid-morning arrives, there's a group of followers, all very highly energized. They're singing and dancing. You know, we have this idea that in Jesus' day, people sat in little rows like this, quiet. No. It was much more like that hugging and kissing you were all doing this morning. People were singing and dancing. They didn't know that they were supposed to sit quietly as they joined together for their learnings and teachings. They were jostling for a place up front next to the master, and then they just slowly gravitate towards the end of the group, you know, in the back where they'd gossip and share stories. Slip to the rear, their children making up games, and the children darting in and out of the group along with the village dogs. They stop for lunch along the way. They get out their herbs and their wine. Yes, their wine. We heard about that this morning. Their olives. And they wonder what on earth they're doing. Where are they going? Some are hopeful, some are expectant, some are skeptical, some are curious. They're all swept up in this life-affirming procession of hope. By the end of the day, they reach the little town of Nahum. Small rural town in the foothills. Now this word, this name, Nahum, means peaceful and beautiful and green pastures. The name is a stark contrast to what is really going on there, because the harsh reality is that this is a barren and impoverished place. And this, my friends, is a major clue that things are not what they seem here, and that we need to look beyond appearances. Now, at the same time that this procession from Capernaum is arriving, another procession is forming in the center of town. It's a funeral procession. And shrill lamentations and cries of grief echo out over the valley. And the mourners reach the gate of the village just about the same time as Joshua's procession reaches the center of town. And the two processions meet. Joy and sorrow mingle at the gate. Now, historians tell us there was no gate. There never was a gate here at this little town, but gateways represent this passageway of life, of transitions and shifts. The two groups stop. They face each other. The singing and the dancing ceases. All of life and death and the whole human experience meets right here in joy and in sorrow. A widow leads the mourners. And now her only son is dead, and his body is being carried on a funeral bier for burial to the caves outside the village. And Jesus sees the grieving mother, and immediately he understands what this means to her. You see, widows were especially vulnerable in that culture, as they are in many places in the world today. She's facing a life of poverty, even slavery, without a male relative to support her and to help her. But Jesus, in that moment, recognizes the social concerns of his time, because he was an advocate. He was an activist. He recognized the poor and the oppressed. And he doesn't stop to preach. He doesn't stop to give a sermon. Instead, he moves swiftly, and to the woman he offers words of comfort, and then he does a most radical thing. He reaches out and touches the dead. This defies all rabbinical law. You do not touch the unclean, the dead. But Jesus went for it. He touched the young man, and immediately the young man got up and began to speak. Now that's the story of Jesus as the great exception. The great exception with extraordinary supernatural powers. It's an inspiring story. It's inspiring in its wonderful powers of healing, and yet it's also a frustrating story for me, because, you see, history is heaped high with grieving mothers, with impoverished widows, for whom no such miracle occurs. And we miss the mark if we take stories like this too literally and hear it to just be about physical healing. Of course, we all want to see physical healing, but when we're so fixated on that outcome, we miss the other lessons of healing that are happening, the other powerful lessons of healing. how does a story like this reach us now in the face of loss? Because such a miracle worker like this may not arrive to heal our loved ones. We know that healing happens. We've seen it. We've experienced it. We've celebrated. And we've also seen that sometimes it doesn't happen in the way we want it, no matter what we believe, no matter what we choose to believe or what we want to believe. And yet healing happens in so many other ways. When our hearts are opened, spontaneous compassion pours out from us. We show up like you do here today. You show up. You take action. You wake up. You are waking up. And we encourage each other, and we lift them up out of their deadened state. And all this stems from a belief in spirit, in God by whatever name, in wholeness itself. These are the beliefs that Jeshua demonstrated in this story as the great example, not the great exception. He shows us how to live. He shows us to believe beyond appearances. A town that is impoverished and grieving is called beautiful and peaceful, and there's life in a young man that appeared to be dead, and we reach outside our own race consciousness to take care of others outside our tribe. You know, compassion will not raise the dead. But the way we show up and love each other, that is the miracle. That is the miracle. The way we show up and love each other despite our losses. You know the story all about healing, physical, emotional, spiritual healing has always been a core belief in unity. We've heard the story of Myrtle's healing, right? From TB, everybody knows that story. Put everything in motion for the unity movement, and healing services are a major part of this teaching and result in many healings and miracles. And Charles Fillmore, maybe you know this as well, he came to believe that ill health is totally unnecessary, that old age is unnecessary, that death itself is unnecessary. This is what Charles Fillmore believed. And it might sound a little bit over the top for us right now, but it was a popular notion, not an uncommon notion at all during those times. That was a strain of thought that was moving around. And today most unity teachers don't make the same kind of claims. We believe that healing happens, but we make no claims about how or when or where or even what it is. Right? Now, perhaps some of you know this story, but I'm betting that a lot of you don't. And I hope that we start sharing this story more readily in our unity churches. You see, Charles and Myrtle had 3 sons. Their youngest son was named Royal. You know the story? I'm not sure, yeah. He was an optimistic, upbeat young man, very involved in the unity movement. He went all over the country promoting it and teaching it to people. In his early 30s, he married Frances, and they were so in love. And the Fillmores, they were overjoyed because they had a daughter finally in the family. And then within a couple years, they had a beautiful granddaughter. Well, a couple weeks after the baby was born, Frances died. And the family was in deep shock and mourning. Royal was devastated. And we can only imagine what went on in the hearts and the minds of these people, these premier healers of the world. what went on in them about their faith and their beliefs. Their joy, you see, and their sorrow had met at the gate of life and death. And soon after, Royal began to decline. He never recovered. He died at age 34. Tragedy, loss. And what did Myrtle believe? As every day she missed them, and every day her grief was as strong as it gets, just like all the rest of us who grieve. And in her letters that she wrote, she said, I don't know, but I do know that they don't seem gone from me, really. That the veil is so thin that I can pretty much touch them. She believed in the resilience of life, and that their work, that Royal and Francis's work, was still continuing in some mysterious, eternal way. It's easy to believe in the drama of a physical healing. But the Fillmores made their belief in a reality beyond the material real. In their belief that the work and bliss of spirit is ongoing. And that belief is even more compelling, at least for me. Breathe. Breathe with me, please. See, I know something about this business of healing and belief. I've had my own beliefs challenged. Just over 4 years ago, my husband, Rich Henry, made his transition. He was 63 years old. Bright, deeply spiritual, deeply respected and loved in our Unity community. And through our deep faith and Unity teachings in the course of our journey together, we came to see wholeness in a much deeper way than just physical, just material. We stopped seeing illness as failure and death as a mistake. Rich's courage and his strength and his peace, and especially his faith, inspired all of us. His life and journey through his transition evoked his belief, and his belief transformed his experience. And I came to know, not just believe, but to know with every fiber of my being what wholeness really is. Such a much deeper way, beyond illness and death, beyond what we so narrowly term as life. Life. And some years ago, before this all happened, Rich and I lost a dear friend. And the night she died, Rich had a dream. And the dream, he was told this. She's arrived. She's arrived at her destination safely. She's transformed from love into pure love. She is transformed from love into pure love. And it was a dream that comforted us greatly. It was a gift. And in Rich's last days and last breaths, I repeated those words over and over again to him. You are transforming from love into pure love. And this is my belief. It's a belief that we shared together, that we're always evolving as he has, always transforming and growing. And the more of it that you do here in this beautiful community, the more that we do consciously, the easier it is to surrender to it completely when our time comes and we stand at that gate. The more growing we do from love into pure love. A few days after he passed, I felt his presence most clearly, that veil being so thin, as Myrtle said. I felt his presence clearly nearby, and these words seemed to be coming from him. Yes, it is such pure love. Unimaginable love. Pure, unimaginable love, the generator of the universe, of everything. We see that kind of love in the great example of Jesus. It is what he believed. What did Jeshua believed? Well, he believed that we're called to move out of the familiar into where the need is. To look beyond appearances to wholeness itself. To move into compassionate action. Jesus believed in showing up and getting your hands dirty. Believed in service, resilience, renewal, hope. To speak with authority to what appears to defeat us and deaden us, to those old beliefs that no longer serve us, and to rise up. To rise up. Dear friends, these were the beliefs of the great example, Jeshua. May we share in these beliefs together and rise up and do this good work. Namaste.